Hello, all. It's me, Jordyn Smith, the voice and the astrologer behind this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. I wanted to jump on here and talk a little bit about Pluto stationing and retrograde. I know I made a video last week about it, but today it's really, really interesting to look at the astrology of this for this particular day. I'm going to bring this chart up in just a minute for us to have a look at it together. And what I want to say is, you know, I feel on a collective level, especially I think that it's more of in this area of astrology, I see it so much because there's this community going on around why we're here and what we're trying to work on and how we're trying to evolve. But Pluto in Aquarius is so much about really, I love using this expression, liberating from the chains that bind us, right? It's like we are liberating from anything that is not in resonance with our own soul nature or our own soul sovereignty. And typically that this has to deal with our conditioning. And I've talked about this before, and our conditioning is definitely a Saturnian Capricornian dynamic 10th house. If you want to look at like your own conditioning and why you've chosen this, that's a great place to start, is the types of conditioning. But to give an example, I'll relate it to a personal story for myself. This is, what I typically do, but I came in and I chose a family where I was being reconditioned about religion and things around societal gender expectations and gender roles and things that were repressive. And it's not because my family was trying to be oppressive or repressive. It's just that's their stage, not all of them, but some of their stage of evolution is really rooted in more of a consensus thought. I chose this because for my own soul's evolution, I wanted to work through my own masochism that I was holding within me, feeling like I needed to atone for things that I didn't need to, that were actually things that were natural about me, and feeling guilt and shame and judgment around what was actually natural. So Pluto and Capricorn, there could be these dynamics on personal levels where we're kind of working through the baseline of this, that self-reflecting on, why did I come into this, or why did I choose this situation? And ultimately what it helps us do is, like, for me, as someone who has a lot of Capricorn but having masochism, it taught me about not feeling victimized about it, because I actually made this choice to come into these dynamics because I wanted to liberate myself from them and work through them. But with Pluto and Aquarius, we are working through our conditioning, whatever that may be for you personally, whatever it is that has been you've lived through in this lifetime up until this point, and the choices that you've made that are stemming from your own personal conditioning that you chose in this lifetime to re-experience as a way to ultimately evolve. So Pluto and Aquarius is where we're liberating from those chains that bind us. That way we are being able to experience our unique individuality on a soul level. It's about the inner friendship within, right? As we liberate from dynamics that we're meant to as a way to evolve through the emotional body, we get to experience friendship with ourselves. And that is, essentially also what Pluto and Aquarius can be, is experiencing the inner friendship, the inner communion that each one of us has within our soul structure. And so this has been a tremendous time with Uranus and Taurus ruling this Pluto and Aquarius that is now stationed retrograde. There can be this intensification today of like feeling scared, or I'm not really sure what to do, especially because this is on the heels of like Venus squaring off with Pluto. It's still technically in a square, and that's a first quarter square. Like the need to create action to do so is what that first quarter square denotes. But it's like Uranus and Taurus has been about transforming our relationship to self so that way we can understand our unique soul individuality. Again, I will post the link from last week if you didn't watch this conversation that I had where I go into that. But I wanted us to keep this in mind because as Pluto retrogrades are reviewing, reliving, in order to resolve some type of dynamic. So we can actually be confronted at this point in time to relive an experience of some dynamic that was troublesome to us. And it's not so that we feel like we're suffering or to hurt ourselves on a soul level. It's so that way we can resolve that dynamic and have an actual liberation of breaking free from those types of dynamics or chains that bind us. And ultimately, with Uranus and Taurus, it is about transforming our inner relationship to self. It's also where we need to listen to our inner voice so we know what action to take. And that helps us when we trust ourselves. It does a couple of things. There's a natural sextile between the signs of Taurus and Cancer. So it pulls in this dynamic of as we listen to our inner voice, not only does it create self-sufficiency, but it creates an ability to be able to emotionally validate ourselves. Like, oh, I can trust my inner voice. I can trust myself. And that helps us to really liberate from any type of dynamic where we're wanting to externalize our emotional validity, right? We're not able to maybe emotionally validate ourselves. And so we're, asking people for the answers that we need instead of tapping into our inner voice. This is such a paramount time to really review and resolve this function of needing to pay attention to that and the inner guidance of our higher intelligence, Aquarius and Uranus, that's emanating from within our souls and the action that we're meant to take in order for this liberation to happen and in order for us to experience this inner communion with self. Taurus also naturally sextiles the sign of Pisces, which means that the inner doorway is always open to our own higher selves that is entangled with source from that which we come from. And there's nothing that makes source more happy than whenever we pay attention to the inner guidance that emanates from each one of us. It is a God-given right, to be able to do this. You can be at any stage of evolution, and one of the best ways to understand that you can trust yourself when you pay attention to your inner voice is how many of us have had the universal experience of not listening to that. And then something happens. And then when we reflect back on it, we're like, had I listened to myself, I would have been right. I could have trusted myself. This is kind of this dynamic of instilling in us that we are connected to some type of higher intelligence and that we do have our own higher intelligence emanating from within our souls. It's sometimes our ego wants to get in the way because that's where our will meets, the soul. And thinking about how our soul actually chooses this personality in this lifetime because we only evolve through the emotional body. And so the emotional dynamics that we're supposed to experience or re-experience in this lifetime, stemming from how our consciousness has been conditioned, is really about, this is the best way to do this. And there are their own trials and tribulations along the way. But with Uranus and Taurus right now, and it still will be in Taurus, like it's not even going to be at 29 degrees Taurus until next July. So even a year from now, we have over a year to really be honing in on these skills. And as a matter of fact, whenever it reaches that anaretic degree, Pluto will be in Aquarius again at 3 degrees. So we have this time of really learning how to rely on ourselves through paying attention to our own soul wisdom. as a way to grow and expand our relationship to self through liberating from these dynamics of where we've over-identified with different forms that are not in resonance, and it's for our own soul evolution. So I wanted to share my screen with you guys to show you how Pluto is stationed right now at 2 degrees Aquarius, ruled by Uranus at 22. This Uranus is trining Ceres in Capricorn. This Ceres is ruled by Saturn and the sign of Pisces. And then Pluto is also sextile to Mars in Aries. So let's break this down for a second, okay? What this is reflecting is that the liberation that is wanting to occur from where we've over-identified within crystallized structures of how we have been conditioned, there needs to be objectivity. And through this objectivity, we liberate from these dynamics that are not in resonance with our own soul individuality. And as this happens, we get to understand what feels authentic, Jupiter, in a new phase conjunction to Uranus with our own soul nature. Jupiter is also approaching a conjunction with the North Node of Venus. Venus is in Taurus as well. This North Node of Venus is ruled by this Venus in Taurus. So we can see how we're really trying to develop a deeper sense of inner self-reliance by paying attention to our own soul wisdom and our own soul nature. The trine between Uranus and Ceres is what we call a disseminating trine, meaning that there is a lot of information that can be disseminated and integrated with more of an ease if we choose to act on this. And what does this do? This helps us to regain our sense of authority, a natural authority. Ceres is about, it's the great mother who's helping to facilitate this nurturing process of regaining our soul nature. And what's intrinsic to each one of our soul natures is the ability to be our own sense of authority, to ask and answer our own questions. So there could be people right now who are trying to liberate, reliving through certain key dynamics throughout this Pluto retrograde cycle of where maybe they have paid attention to the advice and the voices of others. And Ceres here, trining Uranus, is saying to liberate from this, to be your own authority, to regain the ability to make your own correct judgments. All you have to do is self-reflect on where you've made incorrect judgment in the past and where you didn't listen to yourself. It goes back to that universal experience. This is also about nurturing and facilitating this process of not just making correct judgment, but also by being your own role model, by being your own mother and father. And that's because Ceres is also ruled by Saturn and Pisces. And Saturn and Pisces, so much of this has been about needing to restructure our consciousness through dissolving the man-made types of conditioning that have impeded on knowing ourselves and our own unique individuality on a soul level. So there's this need that with this trine from Uranus, Uranus being the ruler of Pluto, liberating from these types of crystallized dynamics of where we've overinvested ourselves in the way that we've learned how to do particular things. Uranus is trining this Ceres that's saying, hey, let's dissolve this so a restructuring of our consciousness can take place so we can really feel like we're whole into ourselves, that we can have the ability to trust ourselves, to understand our own emotional dynamics, to understand our feelings, to listen to ourselves, to pay attention. Because so much of how we are conditioned is growing up, there's an authority, right? And we're conditioned that you don't know, do as I say. And sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do, but do as I say. So we end up being conditioned to let go of our sense of natural authority and the ability to ask and answer our own questions or to make judgment calls, feeling incapable of it on some levels. There's this whole dynamic right now that's wanting to nurture this process of regaining our sense of being our own role model, our own mom and dad. So a restructuring can take place and a strengthening and transformation of our relationship can take place. And then with Pluto, sextile and a crescent phase sextile to Mars. I spoke about this earlier this week. I'm going to stop the share. This is about breaking new ground. It's about starting a new cycle. It's unformed. We don't really know what it is. The astrology is reflecting these things that I just talked about, but we don't know exactly how this is going to look for each one of us in our own unique individuality. I mean, I couldn't tell you unless I was literally looking at your chart and you were talking to me, right? Like, this is more of a generalized approach, but these are the underlying dynamics. And this crescent phase sextile between Pluto and Aquarius and Mars and Aries is these desires on a collective level and on personal levels to really act on what it is that we're desiring to do in order to break free, to liberate Pluto and Aquarius from old patterns so that new patterns can start to take place, can take form, can take shape. And it's not going to be known what that looks like for a few months, but the need is to act on this. And the way through is by paying attention to our inner voice and understanding that we can trust ourselves. And guess what? If you mess up, you get back up and you dust yourself off and you take it as wisdom. Oh, I learned from that experience. Because that's the beauty of, Aries energy, is that from action creates counteraction, and that gives us feedback. And that feedback helps us learn about ourselves. And this is essentially what Venus, Uranus, and Jupiter are all wanting us to do right now, is to learn more about ourselves as we are in this new cycle. But something is still wanting to culminate as Mars is approaching that North Node. But when we act on these desires to break new ground and we have courage, even if we fail, it reminds me of Brene Brown. She says, it's about daring greatly. And if we fail, at least we're failing while we're daring greatly, and we're learning about ourselves. And that information that we receive ignites that Jupiter and Taurus. It helps us expand and grow our relationship to self. Uranus and Taurus helps us to liberate from where we're like, oh, that was an old pattern, or oh, that didn't feel like it resonated. And we're in this complete restructuring of our consciousness process as a way to really ground into our relationship to self, to learn about ourselves. And the need is to create action right now, to receive that feedback. And it can be scary, but there's this, I do want to pull this up. It's one of my absolute favorite quotes, and it's probably because me and Brene Brown is the one who, let me look this up really quick. And it's because this is by Theodore Roosevelt, but okay, let me expand this. I actually have a lot of synastry. I bring up this speech so often, and this is a perfect example of utilizing this speech to give you the Aries courage. And I'm going to pull it up and I will read it out loud, and you guys can save it. You can read it with me as I'm doing this. But it is a bit patriarchal because of the times, and it says man a lot, but I think we all get it. There's still value within this. And it's where Brene Brown, even coined her own book, Daring Greatly, which if you haven't read that, I suggest that you do, because it's amazing and it would be great for this time period. While we're in this Pluto retrograde cycle in Aquarius going back to Capricorn, that would be if you're someone who's into self-help books or understanding things. It's a beautiful, amazing book. I was lucky enough to get to do a workshop over Daring Greatly whenever I worked in mental health, but I just want to leave you guys with this, because it's so much of the energy of what I'm speaking to. Pluto being ruled by Uranus and Taurus, that is conjunct Jupiter. Uranus is in a disseminating trine to Ceres in Capricorn, which is ruled by that Saturn in Pisces, and then Pluto is sextile to Mars in Aries. And let's see here. This is from the worldfuturefund.org. This is just, you can Google it, but this is the type of Aries energy we need right now as we are choosing to dare greatly. And it says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I just feel like this is such a good representation of this chart right now. We are meant to liberate from these things, and it can be scary, and we can feel judged or shamed or ridiculed. But if those people aren't in the arena with you while you're doing your work, who gives a shit? Like, you can fail, but at least you're daring greatly. You're trying, you're getting back up. And this is kind of pulling in the polarity of Saturn and Pisces, which is Virgo, which is literally, every time that we mess up or whatever, as we're learning about ourselves, it's not null and void. If you have like a lot of Capricorn or a strong Saturn or 10th house, you can feel like, this is null and void and I got to start all over again. No, you don't. Virgo, pulling in the polarity of Saturn and Pisces, is about getting back up and trying again, no matter what. So as we try again, we learn more about ourselves. And remembering that Mars in Aries is naturally in conjunct the sign of Virgo. Through action that we take, we learn about ourselves as a way to self-improve, Virgo. And you can't just stop. You've got to keep going. So there are going to be trials and tribulations over the next 6 months of where we are reliving key dynamics that we are meant to be in the arena of breaking free from the chains that bind us right now. The things that hold us back from knowing ourselves, from staying whole into ourselves, we are meant to liberate from these. And it can be hard, or it can just be hella uncomfortable. And I want everyone to know that it is the value in the effort. That is a Virgo saying. I absolutely love Jeff Green's teaching on that. Just that simple thing changed my life because I have so much Virgo in my chart as well. It is the value in the effort. It's no different than that arena speech that I just read. And I want all of us to really understand that this month is beautiful for connecting with ourselves. We are going to have a 6-month period, though, of reviewing and reliving certain dynamics. And the key is to not give up, because this is about liberation and freedom from the known and understanding yourself on a very deep level and transforming that. And the only way you're going to do it is if you have the courage to put one foot in front of the other. And if you mess up, you mess up, you get back up. No need to feel guilt or shame about it. You just keep going. So I wanted to put this out there because I was looking at this, and as soon as I saw this, I thought of this speech, the Man in the Arena speech that Brene Brown even talks about in her book, Daring Greatly. So again, if you are someone who is really trying to liberate from all types of guilt and shame, I highly recommend that book. I will put a link to Amazon in it. Of course, like, I'm not trying to, I'm not getting paid to endorse her, but I feel like it's if you are working through these types of dynamics, like a lot of us all, it's a really great place to start if you haven't read it. And I will see you all next week. I think this is it for my videos for this week, but treat yourselves kindly and give yourselves grace and get after it.